Good to be here. Well, welcome everybody to Real Deal Media's Late Night Thoughts. I'm your late night host, Dean Ryan, and this is a members-only supported kind of event here because it's the members that keep this engine running and keep the faith, because faith is so important. It's right up there with hope, right up there with courage, right up there with irony. Why not? It's a wonderful late night here. Many people have been wondering, where have you been? What is going on with you, Dean Ryan? Well, so much is going on, and it is a cold and frosty raining night here, and trying to capture the ambiance as we do this here and sail away and coast into the midnights and beyond. But so much is going on. Outside of myself, there is literally a droplet of breaking news no matter where you turn. The Epstein files are the talk of the town. Will they, won't they? Well, now we hear that national security, due to national security, they're going to be releasing redacted files of the Epstein case, which many of us kind of saw coming from afar. And there's literally three ways to look at that, as there seems to be a prism of different angles and perspectives with just an abundance of topics. But in this particular case, well, you can look at it in the sense of, number one, that files are being held back by the New York field office of the FBI, as some have stated. The other case you could look at as they're using the drip of the Epstein as leverage, but we've been getting drip for so long that we need bloody mops just to get through it all, because none of what's dripping is any substantive kind of format. It's good for our iron, our DNA, our soul, our truth. And then finally, the other angle of why this is not being given to the people, what's not being revealed, I'm sure you already know, the Israel factor. And you can apply that to all of the big revelations. P. Diddy documents, Epstein, JFK, Sirhan, MLK. But let's go a little further here, because so far we've been dealing with, or I should say assessing things to what's on the menu. And if you know me, I'm not a menu guy. When I go to In-N-Out Burgers in California, I don't order on the menu because I know the secret menu. So what I mean here is, well, let's see about this now. If QAnon, to use as a reference, has been saying for years now that they're saving Israel for last. Okay, Israel for last. And we are on the last chapter of this pandemic. We literally just jumped on Zelensky like one of them turtles from Mario Brothers. And the Ukraine war is nothing but a memory now of the past. Well, doesn't that leave one more domino? And if you've noticed the patterns of how Trump operates, it's anything but smooth. And it's everything that has to do with chaotic strategy. And I believe I overheard Steve Bannon saying over the weekend, as he was quite puzzled about Trump's Gaza plans, that it was done to change the subject, to change the topic of having a war with Iran. And then I thought about that, and I said, well, the Trump formula, the past nearly 10 years almost, has been to outdo his adversaries. For instance, when John Bolton, the walrus, wanted to bomb Iran and then bomb Venezuela, well, Trump went over the top and said, yes, we're going to go in there and we're going to bombs away. Or I also recall 2018 when Parkland High School fiasco, that false flag event took place, and all the parents had the meetings. Remember all the gymnasium meetings with all the parents? We need more gun control, strict gun control. Trump said, well, yes, we're going to have the red flag laws. And you saw the Diane Frankensteins at the time clapping away. You saw the gun grabbers just clapping and clapping and clapping. All the CCP and friends of doing golf claps. In North Korea, we're going to bomb the Rocket Man. Now, in all of these instances, Trump has outperformed the Warhawks, meaning he's being over the top, which provides noise and confusion. As Bannon was eloquently stating, that it changed the narrowing target of let's go to war with Iran, that was being echoed by Netanyahu and his war criminal cabinet, to saying, what? Trump wants to put what in Gaza? Now, on its face, it's very insulting. It's like, are you crazy? You're worse than Netanyahu? But that's on its face. And then I think about the times I lived in Vegas. I was part of a World Series poker team that you probably are aware of if you live in the United States. It has a lot to do with the ESPN World Series of Poker, huge ordeal. And there were so many strategies going into that tournament. And one of them being my lead on that, who was the poker player himself. Well, he would stay up late till about 2 a.m. to then play poker players who were drunk and out of their mind and then beat them at their game. So, I understand the many towels, the many ways to Sunday, but the many ways to the art of the deal. It's not conventional. It's not pretty. It's not attractive. But then if you know the underlining is world peace, no war, then you look at the overlining and it's just atrocious as it is. I mean, literally you have Dan Bongino, who's the deputy director of the FBI, and they asked him, what is the most nearest and dearest topic to your heart? He said,
what cause is dear to your heart?
Cause is dear to my Israel, defense of Israel.
Israel and the defense of Israel. Think about that for a minute. Israel and the defense of Israel. What if we were saying that about Ukraine? What if this was being said about China? But it's just, I can't accept that is actually the truth. I can't accept that all these people in unison, in echo format, are all saying Israel, Israel, Israel. Now, what is the other option here? So, let's say they weren't saying Israel. Let's say they were saying Iran, 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 and goodbye to Israel. So, then I thought about it. Well, the only alternative, the only conclusion, Israel would be obliterated, and all the people there obliterated, all the machinery, everything there obliterated, because they don't want to exist. The cabinets, the people that run Israel don't want to exist with lesser thans. They want a greater Israel project, and they want to do it with the U.S. military might and the U.S. credit card behind them. So how do you maneuver the entanglement of Israel that's embedded in the United States, in the fabric of the Christian churches throughout the United States? And it's all predicated on what is said in the Bible about Israel. Jesus will come back, will rise again, and then punish the Jews. And I'm probably paraphrasing. I'm not the most religious scholars like I used to be. Not quite the theologian that I once was. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. And I've heard that from many people, and I said, well, where does it say that you create an apartheid for the people that were there prior? Because no one can seem to tell me what happened in 1948. No one can seem to tell me the Rothschild involvement in the creation of the country. It's equivalent to the Somalis, who have been placed in Minnesota and then wind up taking over Minnesota. I mean, that was done on purpose, by the way. I bring this up from time to time, like the Ganges River, but I can't help myself to think that a race, a culture like Somalians, who are used to the Sahara Desert, 125 degrees Fahrenheit, were all placed in Minnesota, the coldest state in the Union here. Why? Well, it's the Kalergi plan, as we know. So, I take this into account. So, what is the solution? I'm trying to think, what is Trump trying to do? Because he'll take the money from the Israel lobby, he'll take the money from Big Pharma, he'll take all the money, and then he'll use it against him. Look at Bill Gates, who's now sweating like a whore in a crimes against humanity court to foreshadow. It's not going his way. But this is, for all the marbles, this is precision. And there are people who are paying the price with bloodshed decade after decade after decade. And, recently I was told by somebody that they might be moving to Israel. And I couldn't understand why. I'm like, is the wine really that good? I'm like, we're in a time of war. And this is the creepy country that is subject to all major historical elements of the United States, things that have gone awry, hence why things are being redacted, prolonged, because why? Then you hear RFK, who's now going over the top, saying that anti-Semitism should be classified as a mental national crisis. Really? It's almost like what the Democrats tried to do when we were waking up to the virus from that bat who loved us all those years ago in 2021. Who recalls that? When we were figuring out it came from Wuhan lab. And what did the media at the time and the Democrats trying to do? Oh, that's racist. To talk about it coming from Wuhan, that is absolutely racist. How dare you? And there was ads and there were stars coming together. And it teetered out before it started. Teetered out. It's one of those words I enjoy. Teetered out. But, that certainly didn't stop us here from telling the truth. And very convenient. A lot of these functions, gain of functions, all of these viruses, they are made in other countries to have plausible deniability and ultimately to set up a greater war with China. But that's another topic. So, how is this going to end? Because the entire world is looking at the creepy country of Israel with different lens than they used to before October 7th. Many people told me it's a great party country. People go there to party all the time. And, I'm not one who could just hold my nose, close my eyes on what I feel is very cursed, just a land full of sorrows. And I feel the same way about Oklahoma, just as bad as I would feel if I were to go party in Lahana right now. And it's okay to say these things because the people you're not supposed to talk about, the things that you're not supposed to say, according to the people you're not supposed to talk about, are the people who are running things for a long time, but they're losing their grip as the American is waking up and leading out of this darkness finally, as I just saw 5 years ago happening. Don't call me Nostradamus, just the great Karnak, if you will. So I'm trying to see how this is going to maneuver. So I see Trump trying to be the friend, trying to be just a friend of the Israeli people, supporter, and eventually he's going to come to the crossroads and saying, I support you guys, but look at this monster Netanyahu. He wants to keep going to war like Zelensky. And who are they going to trust? They got statues of Trump, and I think that is the plan. Domestically, over 80% of Jewish Americans did not vote for Donald Trump. Jewish Americans have been predominantly Democrat since the early 20th century. If you really want to get into it, you look into the Bolsheviks, where the Zionists really stemmed from, which was Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine. And a lot of people don't know that, but a lot of people are knowing that, are learning that, I should say now. And it's okay. It's okay to still have faith, your religious faith. This happens with big religions. It's kind of been the trend the past 20 years. It's no different. Look at the Vatican. Must I say any more? I mean, I recall at the time people trying to defend the church from all the sexual abuse. I heard a lot of, well, only God can judge. Well, you don't know that. And so, that's the problem too. A lot of Catholics back then, maybe the older Catholics, that class, are identical to what a lot of the, I see a lot of the Jews and Israelis today. I see a lot of similarities in the sense that there's a lot of reaction, emotional reaction, and not a lot of response or listening. So you could say there's been over 55,000 deaths, completely obliterated Gaza. And that doesn't mean anything to the other side, just from my account, my witnessing. It then goes into, well, Hamas, we got to take it out. And the hostages, the Hamas, and, it turns into a tribal football team. And this is what's really dangerous, because we have lived through this before as Americans. We have lived through the tribalness that's tied to the religion, that's tied to, at that time, the grand old party, the Republican Party. And this is exactly what the Bushes did. And here we are again. So it's a masterful precision that I believe Trump's doing. And I believe this because I'm a gambler. I got problems, but yeah, I'm a gambler. And I hope that's what he's doing. But we just saw the masterpiece, the maestro himself, completely tear Zelensky apart, like picking off limbs of a cricket. And is it safe to say Netanyahu is going to get the same treatment? Although Netanyahu, I believe, is the final boss. Israel's the final boss, because what Israel has perfected over the course of decades now is something called the brownstone operations. And to put in layman's, that's the blackmail operations. It's the blackmail that was done on Bill Clinton throughout the 1990s and many others, Epstein, and it's the sexual blackmail. Let me give you an example. For 20 years, or as long as I can remember, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, never saw a conflict or war he didn't want to just get us involved in, cheer on. In fact, him and John McCain, very close as they were huge cheerleaders and recipients of U.S. aid. That's right. That's right. He was a huge proponent of the Ukrainian war. He's a huge proponent of taking down Iran, taking down Russia, and ultimately, where it's leading, to take down China. Although that's conflicting for some and many who have invested in that major creepy country, China. And, I told Aaron Cates, who works here, I said to him, Aaron, I don't need to go to a country to know it's creepy. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, I know I'm not going to like escargot, eating snails over there in France. I don't need to try it to understand I'm not going to like it, I know when I know, I like when I like. But back to Miss Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, after the Zelensky fiasco, held a press conference, and in rare form, like a one-off, a leap year, held a press conference and said that Zelensky, who he coached and all these things invested in, Zelensky is not the man for the job, and how dare he talk to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance like that. He needs to step down. And many people were shocked. Many people fell out of their chairs. It was shocking to see that a war hawk like him would say that. Now, here's what happened. Days later, as of today, past 24 hours. Well, now there's a new sex scandal of a gay male escort who's now coming out of the woodwork saying he's ready to talk about his escapades with Senator Lindsey Graham. And many people are saying, well, what, no shocker there, no surprise. But if you step back and you look at the timing of it, maybe it's true, but maybe it's not true due to the timing of this revelation, if you will. And listen to the car accidents everywhere here on this very rainy rainstorm that I find myself in. So you look at the timing of it all, and it's starting to make sense that we are willing to say that 90% of the Congress, the United States Congress and Senate are completely blackmailed in sex and financial crimes, insider trading, defense stocks, and yes, the good old-fashioned brownstone operation of all the tapes with escorts, you name it. And in some cases, well, I mean, certainly Bobby Kennedy was caught with Epstein. To give him the benefit of the doubt just for the sake of this segment here, it can be safe to say that some people were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's being used against him. Then you're going to find out some people were drugged and woke up and saw all kinds of just red flags that could be used for blackmail. That's how dangerous this is. Powerful people. Powerful people. Powerful people. And Israel is a country where they harbor pedophiles. I mean, this is real. I mean, I heard about this a while ago, learned even more about it. This is what they harbor. There's a lot of dual citizens. That's one of the reasons. And if we were talking about dual citizens with China, I mean, it would be over. People would be up in arms. But this plays on people of faith and what they were indoctrinated to believe, to never question, to never flinch, and never second guess the unwavering allegiance and support of God's country. And you take an account of the Albert Pike prediction, how Israel was going to be set up for World War III. And so now it makes sense. They create Israel, put it in the heart of Arab country, the exact region that Chris Columbus was trying to avoid when trading, because, some of these countries are crazy. I mean, criticizing Israel doesn't say, okay, let's bring in the Sharia law and the Taliban man people. No, that's a false paradigm. Because criticizing Israel, it's because you care about the people who live there, live in the region. Criticizing the United States military in a lot of these unjust wars is because you care. Dissent is the greatest form of patriotism. And let me ask you, what would happen? What do you think happened to a lot of Black Americans who didn't go along to get along and support and rah with Black Lives Matter? Does anybody know what those people had to go through? And even further, what if they were Black conservatives? Do we even know the peer pressure, the disowning? Let's go further. Does anyone know anyone who his entire family, friends, and network of people all were vaccinated and they chose not to get vaccinated? What happened to those people? Do you know the sorrows they had to go through? Because I do. Many people told me they were on the brink of suicide, so they caved and got it just to avoid the isolation. There's the key, isolation. People are bonding mammals. They want to be accepted into the group. They want to fit in. They want to be part of a hierarchy chain. The Freemasons. And it goes back to Plato's cave. Nobody wants to question the shadow puppets. It's just being that. They want to buy into the fear and fit in and not stand out. Because when you stand out, then you have to believe and trust in yourself. And that is the struggle of the individual, the greatest minority in the world. So fast forward it to all these different things now. So let's see, in the past 5 years, if you were a white person in the past 5 years, just on that spectrum, and let's from Trump 1.0 onward, and you celebrated your culture, but you were led to believe that you can't because you don't have a culture because you're white. You don't have European grandparents from Sweden, therefore that you have nothing. So you were taught to hate yourself, hate your culture, and on top of it, here's some experimental fluids. Inject them in your arms and sit and spin. That's it. And to go against that for some people, a lot of people, is not possible. Because not everybody has a Dean Ryan in their circle or people in this community. They're isolated when they think like us. They're isolated when the cameras are off, the shows are over. They don't have anyone else to face, to talk to, except for the accepted collective of BLM, the accepted collective of, well, Israel's good, don't question. The accepted collective of, oh, Trump's a racist, and you don't think otherwise, do you? Because you do want to work here again. So this is all groupthink. It's herd mentality. And it's perfectly okay to like Israel. It's perfectly, you can like Black Lives Matter and what you thought it stood for. But let's look at the people driving these ships. Because these are nothing but storefronts. Look at the people that say, well, we care about people. We have to censor fake news. We have to censor hurtful speech because we care about our citizens, from getting disinformation. And on the surface, you're like, well, what's wrong with that? Well, there's always something wrong with it. There's always something wrong when you have to use censorship to justify the ends. When you have to use censorship to justify the means to the ends. And you look throughout history, when has censorship ever truly, honestly, ever worked? Especially in this country. When has that ever worked? When you were in the 1960s and you were told you are not allowed to drink from the whites only drinking fountain at school, and you were censored. And people did it. People did it anyway. They went against that. You want to talk about diversity? The interracial couples. A lot of Hispanics in California and Arizona, Texas too, from, baby boomers, there wasn't a lot of what we see like in LA and a lot of pride for the Hispanic cultures. They had to assimilate in the Caucasian kind of society. So assimilation comes naturally. It's never forced. True diversity isn't the skin pigmentation, the religion, the height, the weight. True diversity is opinion, it's thought, it's ingenuity. And that is the scariest form of true diversity. And, I even see drug dealers. I'll tell you this. I see drug dealers, let's say marijuana drug dealers at the time, put away in jail for years, or people that ran cocaine into the country, and, they get the book thrown at them. And I think, how hypocritical is this? Because the government doesn't like competition. But then why did this happen to begin with? So then I traced it back here to the 1960s. You see the introduction of drugs to a generation of young people, 20s, teenagers, that were being psyoped and co-opted by the communists. In addition, they were being pulled by the military-industrial complex. So you have all these forces. You have the authoritarianism of the LBJ administration, totally criminal. You have the infiltration of communists through the education systems and through culture and protests. So what did the establishment do? They injected LSD, marijuana, and all kinds of different substances into the population, who were waking up to the crimes, to the truth of what really happened November 22nd, 1963, but also to the possibilities of what could be. And a lot of the anger outside of the war from that generation was the fact that they had these parents that just didn't understand. That generation, the silent generation, World War II, they didn't really know how to communicate. Dad had a problem, came home from work, he beat people up, hit the whiskey bottle, and that was it. There wasn't these self-help books or groups. There was no reference point before all this. And a lot of this came too as the creation of television, music, culture, pop culture as we know it, all came at once. There was no reference point. There was no reference point for a lot of those acts too. You look at the Beatles, there was no reference point of, gee, how do we play a stadium, and what kind of technology do we need? And, so there was the first of everything. And we're kind of in a similar way. We're there now. And just in my industry alone, I went to college. Well, for journalism, I was on the college newspaper, 2 different colleges. I was a writer and editor. And then I went into broadcast journalism as newspapers were in decline, the beginning of the decline. But there was no reference point of how to deal with big tech censorship. Nobody in their right mind even thought at one point we would have to be dealing with censorship in the modern day book burning that's now done digitally. And even worse, the worst kind of censorship is self-censorship. Nobody thought that the social crediting score that we might have heard whispers of from the Far East would be at play, in motion, for our own good, right here in the United States. So there was no reference point. You're either on radio, television, or in print. And people like Alex Jones, people like Mike Adams of Natural News, others, they are the pioneers. They are making the mistakes in real time. They are leading through the dark, and myself included. And we're trying to figure this out. And just like we're learning a lot about what's happening in the Middle East for the first time, we're learning a lot about blackmail, we're learning a lot about where the money in this country truly goes. This is a first in history. And it's a very dangerous time to not have precision when you're playing at that level. And when you're playing at that level, you're not necessarily just playing to the peanut gallery. You're trying to play an opponent. So there was no reference point to a lot of these things. There's a lot of figuring it out as you go. And so, I look back at that generation, figuring out as they go. And they gave us, the establishment put Charles Manson in place to end that momentum of free-thinking people to end the innocence of the free thinkers. And from the authoritarian side, they were saying, well, we put that in there to psyop what would have been a communist revolution. To psyop, to infiltrate the communists who were already infiltrating the protests. Now, here we are again. What do we see? The same thing at play domestically on a much cartoonish level that I can't even articulate. Outside of, we're straight up fighting the Central Intelligence Agency and the criminal elements of that in all agencies in this country, whose PR firms, aka the American media, are now becoming shadow banned in their own form because nobody trusts, nobody listens, nobody watches the late night legacy shows. It's a decentralized world that is filled with now individuals who know what they want, when they want it, and know how they're going to get it, rather than being spoon-fed by the mama bird, per usual, cradle to grave, the nanny state. People don't want that. I mean, even people like Piers Morgan gets that now. A man who I absolutely despised 10 years ago when he was telling Americans to give up our guns and, kiss the inbred webbed feet of Prince Charles. He's now gotten it. He's now getting it. So what we saw a lot of in the 1960s is a lot of what's being replayed here because the country has not healed since then. A lot of broken families have really originated and spurred from that decade. The soldiers coming home, the influx of narcotics in society were all a product of that very twisted decade. And here we are. Now we have a generation of young people who probably won't be able to procreate due to the miracle jabs, who view themselves as professional protesters 24/7, and I'm talking about the Generation Z. They're protesting things they can't really explain or engage in because their feeble minds won't let them. We have a very dumbed down class, which is very dangerous because this is what makes warlords in Africa very, very powerful. And that's why you always see a 14-year-old in that continent with a AK-47 or gangbangers domestically here because there's no long game. There's no imagination. There's no far-reaching of ideas. They kept these people dumb, and they placed identity politics given to us by Barack Obama. And then through the education system, the Mao Institute of China has infiltrated our education systems or university systems for decades now. And this is what it turned out, the ideological subversion that we are dealing with today. Like David Bowie said in Rebel, Rebel, you're not sure if you're a boy or a girl. Oh, how true that's becoming now. And now that's being taken away because it is a psyop. Transgenderism is transhumanism. It's a big pharma psyop and eugenics plan to not kill any particular race outside of the human race as they make way for the Terminators, the AIs, the robots. But we are here again. This time around, we have a bit more UNITY than we did 5 years ago. And it's a dangerous time for the global collectives as the United States continues to edge its way, tippy-toe its way out of European affairs, starting with Ukraine, which I hope we get to the Middle East affairs and edge our way out, because there's a lot of different players there. A lot of different players there. You know, many have heard my recent rants and raves about what's happening in Congo in Africa, and there's a lot happening. Majority, I would say, is out of my hands, but you know what I can control, I try to be the ace in the hole. But there's the outreach of a lot of these countries. I'm now finding out, whether it's now Ukraine, Congo, other African countries, Venezuela, all reaching out to the United States like I've never seen. Almost like it's like something out of a 1980s movie, like Rocky. You know, Rocky beat the Russian, and everybody has the U.S. flag. And I think what people are recognizing, within reason, is that the true sleepy giant called America is now awakening and sleepy no more. There's a new awakening in the United States, and it's having a true domino effect. Because the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is one of the most infectious ideas and dangerous ideas you could really ever base your country on, which a lot of it, and it stems from the Magna Carta, which the entire Commonwealth has probably no concept of what that is. It's the basic human rights. It's the basic stature of what our Constitution is based off of. It's the very thing you have to learn in law school, if that's the direction you go. But a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, we have the right to self-defend, like the Americans. All those people in Australia that scoffed at me when I was there 10 years ago, saying, oh, well, we don't have, shootings like you guys do, we don't need guns. Guns are terrible. Now that tune has changed dramatically. See, the idea of 1776 is quite powerful. And we know history isn't really truly, probably it was 20 to 30% of what we were told that really happened. Could be. It could very well be that George Washington signed some sort of agreement with King George that, look, we're tired of war, and you can just own, centralized banks in the future, or land for your queen and king, and just let us be. That's probably the true history of it all. It's like the true history of the Native Americans, it was tribes versus tribe, very, very violent wars you don't hear about. Yeah, there's some truth in that. Another history we don't hear about, the history of the Vikings, how they conquered parts of Canada, how they wound up in Minnesota. I mean, for crying out loud, Minnesota's football team, they're called the Vikings. Why does everybody in Michigan and, elements or parts of Illinois or Minnesota, Wisconsin, they have that, Swedish, that dialect that just didn't come from nowhere. It came from Sweden. It came from Scandinavia. But we're not allowed to hear that. And so people, in kind of in a closing stature, people who are told, no, you're not allowed to say that, you're not allowed to learn about that, have a natural inkling in this 21st century era to learn and seek the truth themselves. Nobody's waiting here. Nobody's going to abide by an unjust law that says, well, if you speak ill will of a certain person or country, or you're critical, and we'll deem whether it's violent or racist or critical, we'll be the judges of that. We'll be the fact checkers. Nobody's abiding to this. Nobody's abiding by it. When Facebook started censoring hardcore, I recall 2020 onward, nobody said, okay, well, I'm going to just be nice. People went elsewhere, or people, in my case, for certain, just stop using it. YouTube did the same thing. Starting in 2018, they had what was referenced as the Pearl Harbor of censorship during the Parkland High School shooting. You saw massive censorship on YouTube. People didn't wait around. They went to other places, Rumble, Brighteon, Gab. Granted, they don't have the tools in the bling of YouTube, but people are not going to sit down and take it. People are not going to pretend there's not a bleeding apartheid elephant in the room who resides in a ethno-state. So we're not going to take it. We're not going to take it. We're not going to take the peer pressure. We're not going to, just because a religious figure tells us, well, you have to. We're not going to take it. You know, who's edited the Bibles? Have those been edited? I'm sure they have. Who's edited the Torahs, the Korans? Who's truly was Brigham Young for the Mormons? Oh, there's a topic you want to get into. Is how creepy that sector was back in the day. I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that said, you guys are a little out there. Why don't you have Utah and go away? Then they put him in the Union, much later. But, who decides history? Who decides modern history? And who's deciding our future? The answer to at least one of those should be you. Us. Not them. Us. It's not my body, their choice. Not my speech, their facts. My truth, their facts. We are the builders and the captains of our destiny. And we are coming to the final boss, and everybody can feel it. The final boss, the big black swan moment. We got past the nuke scare that we told everybody 3 years ago was going to be in 2024. So we got past the nuke scare, and we got past the alien invasion scare. Now is the final boss, and it's what we're not supposed to be talking about. It will be Israel. And it's going to be a gut check time for people's faith, for people's sense of history and what we were told. But we're not going to get healthier and better as a society if we continue to rely and live on a plantation of lies. And that's how I see it. So I'm going to end it there. Hopefully these thought-provoking statements and reflections give you a sense of what's to come, because that's what it's all about right here at Late Night Thoughts, talking about everything and nothing at all. Anyways, I want to thank you for sharing a bit of this late night with me, Dean Ryan. I'll be back soon as my reflecting in this downtime is only going to empower me and strengthen my caliber for the great and ultimately the great inevitable return. So thank you, members. To become a member, to hear more of these members-only podcasts, join the Night Owls. Go to www.realdealmedia.tv/membership. Join tonight. Join tonight because we need you. Till next time, I'm Dean Ryan saying, always remember to stay tuned and stay awake. Good night, everybody.